good evening. I keep expecting the door to open to be pitch black outside, so I won't take up my whole time. I have a fairly short presentation highlighting some of the research that we've been doing over the last, I guess, 13 years now in partnership with Fayette Alliance. And so I will, my role at the University of Kentucky is in economic development. So I do work across the state helping communities think about how to create more prosperous local and regional places. And I often talk about how amazing Lexington is. And so I'm going to go through just a couple of overarching figures that are really just like those beautiful food pictures, but much less so. So I love Lexington. I live just outside of Fayette County, but I consider myself part of the region. And I love it because it's so very diverse in its economy. So I like to kind of show, what's been going on. So we have really low unemployment rates. Obviously, we had a big spike during COVID, but recovered really quickly, much faster than other places around the country. We had big spike in wages, but have started to slow down. And so we do pay higher than average wages compared to other places and continue to do so. So what I want to kind of hone in here is that Lexington is so diverse in the industries that we have, and the folks who have worked so hard, Commerce Lex and other folks, have created a place that can sustain a lot of disruption, and not a lot of places can do that. And you think about places like Flint, Michigan, other places that were so reliant on different types of manufacturing, and when that manufacturing industry left, the place was left devastated and never was it really able to rebound. Lexington is in a position that almost anything, any one entity, a particularly large entity, could leave and we would be okay. I mean, it would hurt and it certainly would affect the employees that were involved, but overall we would be in a really decent place. And I show this pie slice because it's so pretty, and it's the only colorful thing that I have. So soak it in. And I show it because there are so many pie slices. And all day today I've been training all week economic developers. I do annual training for all of our economic developers across the state. And we talk about this pie. And in places that are a little bit more rural or places that decided to invest in one particular thing, they've got a lot fewer colors. And that to me is a real sign of weakness. Lexington is so pretty. We have healthcare, we've got education, we've got manufacturing, we've got all of our different types of services, retail, we've got management, we've got utilities, all that good stuff. So any one of these pie slices, none of them are that big. And so healthcare is our largest one. We are known as a healthcare community, and we have a lot of different entities that make up that picture. So again, pretty boring numbers here. But just to highlight who we are, and this is across all of the counties that make up the metropolitan area. And again, we pay nice wages for most of our industries. For the most part, we've had significant progress over the last 5 years. Retail is one entity that has seen a decline, and that is something that is nationwide. But you will notice at the very bottom here, not very bottom, but second to bottom, we have this category called agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. It's not a lot of employment. Okay wages, probably around average, if not a little bit lower. But the way it is measured does a pretty significant injustice to what we think of as ag in this community. And so I guess it was about it was about 15 years ago, where some of my colleagues in the Gatton Business College, who I love dearly, published a report that said that agriculture was about 2% of Fayette County's economy. And somehow I ended up being the person that was asked to, sort of address this. because a lot of folks think of Lexington as having this rural aesthetic. We drive around and very quickly can see a lot of farms. We have horses, we've got cattle, we've got crops. And so folks were really concerned that this was not the image that we wanted to portray. And this is one of sort of our crowning brand identities. And this message was concerning. So started this process quite some time ago. Let's skip through that. And so I think this was our third iteration of looking at these numbers. And so they're not terribly different over each time. And unfortunately, the Census of Agriculture was our main way of measuring. Agriculture decides that they're going to change how things are measured each time. And so you can't really fully kind of assess if there have been significant changes or try to figure out what caused that change. But I wanted to highlight some of the findings and some of the trends in the county. So this is just for Fayette County. It does not include any of our contiguous counties that also have significant contributions to the ag cluster. And so we have seen a slight increase in the total number of farms. Not sure if anyone is surprised by the number of farms, given what Fayette County, how large the community is, and how we have a pretty significant urban center. But we have 353 aquaculture and other animal production. That other animal production tends to be a pretty significant number in Lexington. It may not be that same way in other places, but equine is obviously a really big part of our community. Cattle farms, a lot of folks think of Lexington only as a horse, only thinks of horses when we think about agriculture in the community. Not true. And so we have 102 cattle farms. We have 6 sheep and goat farms. So as I'm saying these numbers, think if you know what these particular farms are. We heard a couple of them earlier. 117 other crops, 28 greenhouse. So there are a number of entities within within the county. So on-farm production is extremely important, particularly as it relates in the county to horses and to cattle. But what I tried to do, and my team tried to do, was say, because there is such a presence of particularly the equine sector, there are other entities that surround the equine sector here that, if not for the horse farms, would no longer exist. And so, for example, Lexington is home to 2 world-renowned equine veterinarian hospitals. If those horse farms got up and left, you better believe that those equine veterinarians would not be here anymore, right? So trying to capture some of those relationships to tell a better story of how important the ag sector is to the community and the economy. And so one Christmas, 13 years ago, when we still had phone books, we went through and searched for every business that had something to do with agriculture cluster in Lexington. People have asked us to do this in other communities, and the answer is no. There's no way, because you know there takes a lot of refined attention, because sometimes you're looking up, you do search terms like horses, like farmer, like I don't know, cattle, and you end up with like something around some type of transportation that carries dead people, and you're like, well, I need to be very careful not to include that in the number. So it took a lot of time to go through this, and each time we've updated this report, we've done this again. Now, with the internet, it has gotten a little bit easier, and there's some other databases out there. But what we tried to show is that there's more to agriculture in this community than just counting our farms. Our farms are extremely important. They are the center of everything that's going on, but there's a lot of awesome things that are happening that support and are supported by the sector. So you'll see in the past, there have been studies in other places that look a little bit closer to the farm gate. They look at inputs, so like make sure that we include equipment companies that are providing fencing, make sure we're looking at feed mills, make sure we look at the next stop out of the farm gate that's to feed mills or to grain elevators and so forth. But again, pretty limited, particularly when you think about something as interesting as the equine cluster. So we expanded it and said, what are the other types of businesses that are in our community that are really supporting the sector? And so we did professional services, we have veterinary services, banking. Anyone know someone who is 100% in the insurance, real estate, banking, legal, that supports only the equine sector? Because there are, right? Organizations and associations, just drive through the Kentucky Horse Park right nearby. You better believe that there are a lot of national organizations and state organizations that support ag. We've got trucking, we've got stockyards, we've got retail trade between tack shops, gift shops, home and garden. We've got a little thing called Keeneland. We have farm tours, we've got the Kentucky Horse Park. We even have communications and publications between blood horse racing. We've got my dear employer, the College of Agriculture, and that's not to say that, you know, if the equine industry went away, that the College of Agriculture would go. But it's just showing there's a deep relationship, right? We do talk somewhat regularly. We've got wineries and breweries, so lots of different entities, and now to think about folks like Seedleaf, and other folks that are sort of these nonprofits that are trying to improve access to food. We did not include entities like Jif, like Coca-Cola. All these are local food companies, but we really tried to only think about those entities that are just like one step away from the farm gate. So is it an important sector? I think so. I think when we started, Ethan mentioned the impact of the sector and the total number of folks that are employed. Keep in mind when we did this, we only counted jobs that we could 100% associate with agriculture. So if we had a legal firm, and I can't think of any of them right now, which I guess is good. But if we had a legal firm and one or two folks in there had a specialty that supported ag law, equine law, they were not included because we just couldn't put a name by it, right? We tried to be as conservative as possible. So if we had critics, we could say not included, right? So the number could only be higher, it can't be lower. So you can see how many different industries we were able to find direct ties to agriculture. And so the table on the left is really showing that we had 5,400 people that were directly associated with them on the farm. We had an additional 500 or so that were these inputs to the farm and food products. And so that's what people had been capturing across the country. But now we say, well, what else? There's got to be other jobs that are directly associated with agriculture. And so it cuts off there just at the bottom, but we found another 4,600 jobs, including about $255 million in wage income associated with agriculture. One of the things that we tend to do is we think about you know, there's additional multiplier impacts. So if a particular business, if I was not able to capture that lawyer because I didn't know specifically who he or she worked with or how much they devoted to agriculture, the multiplier impact kind of picks up a little bit of that, but it looks at the relationship between how businesses buy and sell from each other, and then also thinking about if I have Haggard who moves in here and they hire 20 employees, those 20 employees now have money in their pocket, and they go out and they spend locally on goods and services, right? So it's called a multiplier effect, and so the total result is called an economic impact. And so overall, we found about almost 15,000 jobs that could be associated with the ag cluster, and resulting in about $2.3 billion. So when it came down to it, back in the day when this whole thing started, it was, about 1 in 20, 1 in 30 jobs was associated with ag. And when we kind of looked at it this way, we said, okay, it's about 1 in 12. It's not crazy, right? I don't know if we want that number to be any larger, because what we do think about Lexington is we're very diverse, and we don't want to have all of our eggs in any basket. So I think 1 in 12 jobs is pretty good. If it's 1 in 3 jobs, we're in trouble, right? Because if that sector goes away, then we've got 33% of our workforce that is now going to leave or is going to be without work. So we're pretty proud of thinking that's a decent number to talk about its value. It's not 1 in 50, it's not 1 in 30, it's not 1 in 2, but I think it shows just that it is significant. It is not the only driver of the economy. It's not the largest driver of the economy, but it is important. So in the interest of time, I wanted to talk about 2 other pieces because this economic impact piece is important. It's people who are in political positions tend to kind of eat up this idea of economic impact, right? We get elected or not elected based on jobs, and so we want to show that what we're doing has an impact, and so those numbers tend to be important. And I am happy to always provide them most of the time. There are some times where I no. What I think is more important in some aspects is that there's something about this community that is particularly special. And it doesn't always have that easy price tag on it or that easy monetary value. And I moved here in 2005. I interviewed here in 2005, and I moved here from Reno, Nevada. And I grew up on the East Coast. My first faculty position was in Nevada. I flew in to Lexington over the very strategically located airport, and it was done before I got off the plane. So my dear colleague Lee, who I see in the back, I think they took me to really nice restaurants and tried to wine and dine me, but it was done before I got off the plane. What did you say? Yeah, you could have saved some money. Yes. And so thinking about not many people or not many places can have that, and I know many of you are here because you value and cherish that, but can have that very quick arm's length distance between being in a city and being in the country. Even if you're not owning the country, but you can see the country and be out in that piece just as quickly as you can be downtown. And so we did some interviews back in the day, and we met with folks who had nothing to do with agriculture, but we wanted to understand what, if they valued their landscape, the city that they lived in. And I remember Michael Karp, who was the head of UK healthcare, a decade ago. He said, "It's the first thing I do when we pick up, a physician that we're trying to recruit. We take them out Old Frankfurt Pike. Don't even take them onto campus yet. Campus is kind of a crap show right now, so that's probably not the place to go. But they take them out Old Frankfurt Pike so they can see how beautiful it is." I think that speaks volumes. We talked to Lexmark, we talked to some other places that said, yeah, not that they don't care about agriculture, but they don't place the same kind of value on its contribution to the local economy. They do, however, state how important it is for recruiting and retaining workforce. Anytime I bring in staff, people who are interviewing, my favorite story, and people have heard this before, I brought in someone who came from San Diego. That's a tough competition, right? It's always beautiful weather. And so I did the same thing, picked him up, took him down Old Frankfurt Pike, and almost killed us because I went flying over a hill. I'm not as familiar with it, and almost took us right into a tree. He still came. I did not know, but we went to Midway, and my dean at the time was doing something with the same organization, Woodford Forward, and she was there, and she stopped by and then bought him like a $20 shot of bourbon. So that combination of being out in the farm area and having a shot of bourbon was apparently all it took. I want folks to remember that it doesn't always have to be the contribution to the local economy. It is about creating this place where people want to be. It used to be a very affordable place to live. It's not quite as affordable as it used to be, but you won't find many other places that are going to share that aesthetic. The other thing that we did was we tried to capture, not all of us can own horse farms or any type of farm, but we do appreciate that we are close by, and we do believe that the closer we are to a beautiful farm, that it has impacts on the value of our property. And so we did do another study that tried to capture that value and ask folks, what, do you value this? Would you be concerned or upset if this went away? And then we created a hypothetical scenario, which may not be that hypothetical now, which was if 10% of the farmland went away, how much would you be willing to pay to put it into some type of conservation easement or to have this not happen? And on average, people were willing to pay about, I think at the time it was about $49. So when you add that up over all the people, it's a significant amount of money. It was actually pretty close to what the current PDR program funded. So, we're now faced, we started this process a while ago. We are now faced with very different land use discussions than we were in the past, and I think our land is imperiled much more now than in the past. I sat on the Urban Service Boundary Expansion Committee, which I would never, ever want to do again. And everyone was a good person. They all had different interests, and we would have a conversation. I can't disagree that if you took a horse farm and you put another Toyota on there, would you have more jobs? Yes. Would they pay more? Yes. No one will dispute that, or at least if you do, you're probably very wrong. So I understand there are trade-offs. Do I think it would impact the character of this community and the ability to attract the types of professionals and families and businesses here? 100% I do. And when we had very good conversations, very respectful, but I will never forget, we got on the city bus and they drove us around the entire urban service boundary to identify the parcels of land that were under consideration to be brought into the urban service boundary. And even, we were going out Winchester Road, and I am not a farm girl. I went to the college, I'm in the College of Agriculture. I don't know the names of any farm animals. I call young animals puppy anything, puppy cows, puppy horses. I got my dean, who in the past was Dean Cox, who loved horses, and she even started calling them puppy horses. So I don't know anything, right? But I do appreciate it. And when we started driving out Winchester Road, which was an area under consideration, there actually became this little hush on the bus. And I heard someone say, who was more on the developer, said, oh goodness, because they could see that this was the aesthetic that could eventually disappear. And it was something I was proud that they could recognize it. I mean, they better recognize it. It was just, acres and acres of beautiful, farmland fencing, and just when you close your eyes and you think of Lexington, that's what you think of. And they were like, oh goodness, it kind of was like, almost like a dagger to the heart. So still a very difficult decision that had to be made. And I don't think anyone took it lightly. So with that, I was brief because, again, economist, last person of the night, no pretty pictures. But I can go back to this if someone wants color. Or this. It's a pretty horse. I don't know what kind it is. It's a puppy horse. It's got a nice necklace on. I mean, it's nice, yeah. So it's fine, yeah. So the best part is that I actually now own this 5-acre farm. We own a butterfly farm. We own the Butterfly Cafe out in Harrodsburg, or off of Harrodsburg Road. And so we now own this butterfly farm, and I don't know what kind of any of the butterflies are. My husband is the entomologist, so he does everything, but I now own the farm, and it is a beautiful, wonderful, place to be. And so I can appreciate farm life a little bit more. So it's 5 acres, and I've lived there for 2 years, and I've never been in the back 3 acres. Literally never. He's growing like wildflowers. I'm like, there could be dead bodies back there. It's fine. So, but I am now a farm girl. All right. That has always been, It has been really interesting because, again, Kentucky is able to learn, because we're a little bit behind in this market, we are able to learn from other states. But so far, every state that has gone down some route of cannabis production looks very different in terms of the structure of the industry. And so we have been looking into places like Oklahoma, and Oklahoma had a free-for-all. They had no limits on how many producers there could be, how many dispensaries there could be, and it went crazy. There was too much supply, and then it became more of an organized crime thingy, where the industry is being owned by individuals who don't live in the country, and it's got tall gates, fences and so forth. So it's not like the family farm. Arkansas is super, super, super strict on their structure, and they haven't had a lot of impact yet because of how strict they have been. We have been known as marijuana being our numero uno cash crop in the state, and the state has missed out on some good tax revenues from that. So I think my guess is based on how many people applied for the certificates, or that there should be a pretty good supply, and I think there's going to be pretty good demand. So I think it's going to be significant. I don't know. I don't remember who received the first round, if anyone was in Fayette County or surrounding counties, in terms of growing. I know we have a dispensary, I believe. But this is one way to finally capture some of those revenues that were part of the underground economy, that folks can make good wages potentially, and that there can be tax revenues associated with a really important part of the economy. Go back to this pretty picture. Oh, that is not a touchscreen. Okay, so if you want to look here, the biggest pie is healthcare. So 15% is about 1 in 7 jobs. It's pretty good for late at night. So that's going to be our most dense industry. Beyond that, the next biggest one is retail, which is 1 in 10 jobs. So I don't think it's that far off. I mean, I think it's nice. Other ones, I'm trying to find where manufacturing. Manufacturing is also 1 in 10 jobs. We want manufacturing. Manufacturing is great jobs. It's an export industry. So happy with the 1 in 10 jobs. So I don't think it's right up there with retail, manufacturing, education. So I think that's a pretty good number to compare to. There has not been an economic impact study of that program. I would have to think about what those impacts might be. I have seen arguments on both sides of the PDR program and how it impacts housing prices, land values, and so forth. So it would be interesting to look. Now, one thing we have done is a cost of community services study, and that was our last one, I think, was back in like 2017 or so. And essentially what you're trying to capture is the difference between how much it costs to take services out to a site or a type of property versus how much revenue that you get back from that type of property. And so we separate it by the agriculture community, residential, commercial, industrial. And the ag community by far is the largest net contributor to the local tax base. They don't use a lot of services, so they don't have the kids that go to school, but they contribute through property values. So if we thought about it that way, if you keep that land within that current type of, within agriculture, it will continue to be a net giver to the community versus if you convert it. Residential is the worst. If you think about all the services that housing needs, it will have the most significant taker of the local taxes. But I haven't seen anything else done that way. Lexington is so unique in its ag cluster. And I often thought about us, I compare us sometimes to Columbus, although apparently Columbus is much larger. But I thought about like, what would Columbus's ag cluster look like? And it wouldn't look anything like this. You know, having a communications and publications sector going out, I mean, the Kentucky Horse Park is amazing in that it showcases these animals, but all those buildings as you drive in on the right that are national associations, you know, devoted to agriculture, something you won't see really anywhere else because they're here. So that surprised me, and certainly seeing particular businesses that, whether it was real estate, legal, that all they did was ag. It surprised me. And we have, in our college, we have folks, you know, ag lawyers who teach classes and equine lawyers. So I kind of knew it, but I just was surprised that so many people, that's the living that they made. I always thought they kind of dabbled in a bunch of different types of practice, but these folks, this is all they do, is support the sector.